Yes, Patrick?
Let's say we wake up good old Squidward Show-Toon style!
Producing an animated theatrical film takes a lot more time, resources, and crew members compared to an 11-minute cartoon episode. SpongeBob SquarePants has made the jump to the silver screen 3 times, and each attempt to fit the rapidly changing standards of Hollywood filmmaking has left a lot of material on the cutting room floor. Today, I'll be looking at the cut content from this unlikely trilogy, as well as the unanswered questions surrounding them, in order from least to most well-known. I've already done a few other videos on similar topics from this franchise, but this countdown will feature content that I had to do quite a bit of digging to uncover, and by that, I mean I made multiple questionable online purchases. If you're asking why I don't just show everything without any commentary, it's because if I did, the whole video would be a slideshow of images like this. Top quality content. I've mentioned this before, but Sponge Out of Water was marketed using a song that was cut from the film entirely. Thank Gosh It's Monday would have shown SpongeBob getting ready for the start of the work week with a number that introduces the undersea characters. It's got a couple of references to Help Wanted, but also Restraining SpongeBob and the first movie. Actually, it's basically just the other film's intro, but with more singing, right down to the fake-out dream sequence.
Back in the saddle at work I can shine. I love the rat race and the starting line is Monday. Thank gosh it's Monday.
According to current series showrunner Vincent Waller, who also worked on this, it was simply cut for time. The exposition-heavy nature of the sequence that replaced it really feels like a product of over-anxious executives fearing that audiences wouldn't know who SpongeBob is, which is too bad because we lost a fun and fully animated song in the process. Plus, knowing what day of the week the story begins makes this time travel joke funnier.
Great Krabby Patty famine. Whoa, what year is this?
It's Thursday!
According to my calculations, we've only gone 4 days into the future.
You can find this on the Sponge Out of Water Blu-ray, along with a rough animatic version of the scene. It's cursed and I love it.
Thank gosh it's Monday!
Oh no.
This is just 5 full minutes of one guy voicing every character backed by little background music and these eerie simplified designs.
Bum, 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 bum.
Thank gosh it's Monday. Hang up the laundry.
I just totally rhymed.
It's a lot more ambitious than the other deleted version, but its lack of polish and sometimes cruel humor makes it feel like something I was never meant to see. But I'm very glad I did.
I don't recall SpongeBob ever giving you a choice.
There are conflicting sources on whether or not SpongeBob's creator, Steven Hillenburg, approved of the idea for the upcoming spin-off Camp Coral, as the concept for it goes against his supposed wishes for the series to never have a spin-off. However, I do believe that Hillenburg partially conceived the final storyline for the SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run, which sets up Camp Coral. In a now-deleted Reddit post from November 2019, a user claimed that the idea of having SpongeBob travel to a version of Atlantis to rescue Gary after he's snail-napped by an Atlantean king was a pitch that Hillenburg first conceived. Although some details were questionable, series veteran Paul Tibbett confirmed that this premise and the concept art attached to the post were legit, and came from a previously discarded movie pitch he did with Hillenburg after the release of Sponge Out of Water. Apparently, Atlantis would have been a live-action setting with humans acting on sets. Paramount executives must have changed their minds about this idea, because it sounds very close to the movie we're going to get. At the moment, I can't say when Camp Coral began development in conjunction with this movie, which was in production for half a decade, but it does appear that this third movie might be one of the final products from this franchise with the creator's seal of approval, and I hope that Sponge on the Run will be a worthy addition to Hillenburg's legacy. If not, we'll still get a great-looking flick out of it. So when Sonic the Hedgehog was redesigned for his recent live-action adaptation and went from ah to aw, most of its merchandise was too far in development to switch over to the character's new look. This isn't uncommon with animated films, and Dennis from the first SpongeBob movie was also a victim of this. Some of his promotional artwork used in tie-in books, and the model for his second boss battle in the movie game shows him drawn with the same body, but he's got a less menacing face, a stylish ponytail, and most notable of all, a second glove. He looks prepared to join a community production of West Side Story, not murder sea creatures with his feet.
With these spiky cleats, anything is possible.
His final design is less expressive, but more menacing, and it adds impact to when we do eventually see his face. This iteration of Dennis did get his own figure, and it was a part of the Race for the Crown track set. I bought this whole thing off of eBay just to show off this one figure. Always good to get more Paddy Wagon merch though. This is definitely the physically biggest thing I've bought and written off for taxes so far. As for other movie characters with odd alternate looks, David Hasselhoff must not have signed over his likeness to be used outside of the film, because in other media they don't refer to him by name, and only show his face in silhouette. He looks kind of familiar.
Who are you?
I'm not a lifeguard, but I play one on TV.
Additionally, according to these rejected posters by artist David M. Christensen, Mindy and King Neptune may have once had a more human skin tone. That could have been a coloring error, but they wouldn't have looked out of place next to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Now speaking of King Neptune, before I learned to accept that continuity in SpongeBob was almost meaningless, I always wondered why some elements of the first movie never made their way into the show. Why didn't the new locations reappear? And why was there a different version of King Neptune that had a daughter? A location like Goofy Goobers was given a few name drops and outside appearances in the comics, but none of these elements were reintroduced like plenty of other classic material had been. Turns out the problem lied with Paramount, who helped produce the SpongeBob films. According to Vincent Waller, there was a firewall between the show and content produced for the movies. Based on a reply he sent me 11 months after I asked the questions, I'm not bitter, it's just odd how long it took him to reply. These restrictions were removed around season 10. This is why Dennis and Mindy have made cameos, and why there's been a couple of episodes taking place at Goofy Goobers. I feel like this restriction also worked in reverse, and that's why King Neptune was recast and redesigned for the first feature. Excluding video games, he was a one-off character at the time, so it was probably a business decision to reintroduce Neptune instead of assuming that the audience had just seen a single episode where he had a different personality. Call this nostalgia baiting if you want, but I appreciate seeing a little more unity in the series, as inconsistent as its world can still be. Just don't count on movie King Neptune coming back anytime soon. Also, have you ever wondered why Perch Perkins was purple in the movies but orange in the show and didn't become purple again until around season 10? Well, the firewall can also be blamed for that. SpongeBob having an official recolor with the same name was an inspiration for artists everywhere, especially for me and my original character, Yoda. Sponge Out of Water reimagined both the setting and the characters in multiple animation styles. So quite a bit of rough concept and visual development art was produced to nail down its visuals. A thread on the Sponge Buddy Mania fan forum archived most of this material prior to the film's release. I'll be covering the most notable and drastically distinct artwork in this entry. A link to the full thread will be in the description, along with all the other resources showcased in this video. The sequence inside SpongeBob's brain definitely changed the least from its inception, but some interpretations suggest that it would have been more detailed and three-dimensional. I can tell that the SpongeBob Hero Pants tie-in game took some cues from these concepts. Here, SpongeBob and Patrick may have taken on the apocalypse together, or perhaps SpongeBob did it on his own. I'd like to know the context for why he would have been driving the paddy wagon to a volcano with the plankton silhouette. It simultaneously reminds me of both the SpongeBob movie and musical. This intense shot of SpongeBob gagging and screaming underwater was boarded by the late great Chris Riccardi, but didn't make it in. And you know, I can't imagine why. There were loads of different takes on how the cast should look as superheroes, and many artists went for something semi-realistic or heavily inspired by the Avengers. The results were uncanny across the board, whether they tried to make the characters entirely naked or sexualize a cartoon squirrel. A few of the more finalized designs have the Sony Pictures Animation logo attached to them, so I wonder if they were in consideration to handle the CG animation. It really helps you appreciate the designs they decided to go with once you see experiments that were given the appropriate caption of "Squidward can now kick your ass." Let's move on before Squidward can kick mine, because I could spend hours theorizing about every other minute detail, like why SpongeGar was included in this Mega Block set, but not the actual movie. The questions this raises are truly endless. Another piece of merchandise that might not always accurately reflect the film it's advertising are novelizations, since they're usually based on slightly earlier drafts of the script. The books for the first two movies add a few lines or take away gags in order to translate the story to the printed page. They also censor some of the language that earned them a PG rating. For instance, this line,
He's a vicious, cold-blooded predator!
turned into this line.
He's a really big, scary dude who rides a huge motorcycle!
However, a few moments appear to have been left over from a previous draft, and I'll cover the notable highlights. In the first movie, there's scrapped visual gags involving bottles that mark Plankton's failed plans in his lab, and SpongeBob actually filling up the windshield wiper container with mustard, failing to impress the gas station attendants. Both times that King Neptune arrives at the Krusty Krab 2, he has an unseen conversation with Squidward and Plankton. And when Patrick steals back the key to the paddy wagon, SpongeBob replies with this,
Is something about SpongeBob that whispers gay.
The section recounting Now That We're Men features a lot of unique imagery. Instead of monsters, our heroes encounter a different assortment of specially identified sea creatures, and their ham boning is referred to as tap dancing. After the song comes to an end, but before Dennis arrives on the scene, there's a description of valleys and jungles that our heroes traverse, all capped off by a callback to the calendar running gag. I'm thinking this sequence was cut down just so the song didn't last too long. Once again, cutting something for time. There's also a few differences found in the Sponge Out of Water novelization, but I was too impatient to wait for it to come in the mail. So you're going to have to share my disappointment in the United Postal System. Back in the day, Nickelodeon used to feature shorts promoting another show in front of their theatrical films. This trend came to a quick end after the Rugrats movie in 1998. And another attempt wouldn't be made until 17 years later. Infamous Clone High hater John K. created an Animatic for a short featuring his Ren and Stimpy characters that would have been screened in front of Sponge Out of Water had it not gone unproduced. I use the term animatic in the loosest sense.
You idiots!
I know this is very clearly unfinished, but I can't believe this was shown at an international animation festival. The animatic was an extra found on the DVD for John K's crowdfunded project, Cans Without Labels. The short would have involved Ren chastising Stimpy for enjoying kiddie cartoons like SpongeBob. But then Ren cries when he goes to see Sponge Out of Water before the short ends on a fart joke. Classy as always. I feel like the quality of the final product would have depended on how much involvement Nickelodeon had in producing it, because the last time John K. was given a lot of money to animate something, the results were mixed. In 2016, former Ren and Stimpy director Bill Ray hinted that John might be doing a different cartoon for the third SpongeBob movie, but I don't think that's still happening. It was early last year that I made a video attempting to unravel an entire deleted storyline about maniacal alien space cats from the third SpongeBob movie based on a few animatics posted on the portfolio of a storyboard artist. Despite being off-putting at first, it seemed like a lot of fun, and I desperately wanted to see more of what could have been. Luckily, new designs and concepts from development artist Andy Gaskill were recently discovered, and they heavily feature the feline foes. Most of it are attempts to figure out the mech suits for the cats, using a lot of stock images for the faces that were likely just placeholders. I don't know what significance Snowflake has or why he feels such great pain, but cross-examining some file names with the animatics, the commander cat is named Twinkles, and I believe his gleeful lieutenant is Pfeffer. The pieces that got me the most excited were the landscapes and spaceship designs. The latter have a retro-futuristic sleekness to them reminiscent of Ralph McQuarrie, and the Star Wars influence bleeds into the interiors that looks just as great as it did in the storyboards. There's a glimpse of the cat world, with these great militaristic motivational flags, giant chewed-up furniture, and scratching poles as far as the eye can see. A painting set in a similar setting has the file name of Snail Temple Reveal, so perhaps that's what's being guarded here. We got confirmation that Bubbles the dolphin from Sponge Out of Water would have returned in this film, presumably on his home planet. And now it's more likely that his species is connected to the ship SpongeBob pilots in one of the animatics. There's only one appearance of the main characters, which was given the file name of Jailbreak. Given the emphasis on pets and what the plot would become, it's likely that they were attempting to save Gary, maybe planting the seeds for what would become Sponge on the Run. Even after getting a little more context for it, this storyline still doesn't feel like SpongeBob, and general audiences definitely would have thought it was too strange. Still, I have to applaud it for being so faithful to its absurd premise, even if that's probably the reason why this idea never came to be. If only they could have made a movie without having to worry about marketing it to someone who isn't me.
Looks like he's taking off his clothes again.
Let's quickly rank all the deleted scenes on the iTunes release of Sponge Out of Water, minus the one that you already know would top the list. Number 18, Hunger Hypothesis. Super short scene where Sandy explains the apocalypse in a way that's already obvious to the audience. Number 17, Alternate Opening. Very similar to what we got, just with the seagulls receiving a more proper introduction and Burger Beard reading the magical book while he's still on the island. Number 16, For a Dollar. Plankton gets the dollar that he uses to break into the Krusty Krab's vault by selling Karen. I'm glad she wasn't written out of the story so soon, and that this decent exchange was replaced with a more exciting food fight. Numbers 15 and 14, Guitar Case Backstroke and Squidward Dance. Two versions of a scene with Slash that was in the trailer, but not the movie. In one, Squidward is run over by a cotton candy vendor, and the other shows the power of pre-visualization at work. Number 13, It's Alive. Very similar to a few other deleted scenes, but not the most original overall. Also, I think the Animatic editor accidentally overlaid some extra sound effects.
What have I done?
Number 12, Experimenting with a new formula. SpongeBob tries to make Krabby Patties after realizing that the formula has been lost, leading to an alternate version of the transition to the apocalypse with just Mr. Krabs and Squidward. This scene is polished enough that it could have easily been a part of the final cut. Good to see the voice actor for Reg and Flats return too.
You tried to poison us!
Number 11, Too Far Back. A brief time travel scene that introduces the Patricosaurus, which ended up in the Hero Pants game, and the Squidosaurus, which comes out of nowhere in the final version. Why would they cut this? Number 10, Making Krabby Patties. Self-explanatory setup, but still quite creative. Number 9, Erasing SpongeBob's Memory. A different explanation for why rescuing the formula is so important if SpongeBob already has it memorized. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's funnier than the joke they went with.
Alright, SpongeBob, back to work.
Who's SpongeBob?
Number 8, Teamwork Extended Storyboard Version. It's a few verses too long, but I really like the visual transitions, and more importantly, Plankton is voiced by Kate Micucci. Soon she will voice every character.
Wait, we did do it as a Tiam.
Number 7, Muscle Memory. Just like in It's Alive, Plankton tries to get SpongeBob to make a Krabby Patty from memory. But here, all of his attempts end the same way. Good timing and staging here, and it's funny to see an unfinished time card.
242 explosions later.
Number 6, Alternate Apocalypse Outbreak. It's this joke dragged out by half a minute, but it looks like we lost some fun stuff. Number 5, When Are We? SpongeBob and Plankton accidentally travel too far into the future and into the past, and we get a good pair of subversive gags along with a third time travel montage. Number 4, Burger Beard Flashback. Antonio Banderas wears pajamas and his character gets proper motivation.
I'm just trying to cook up the world's best hamburger recipe.
Again, why would they cut this? Number 3, Teamwork Alternate Version. The Thank Gosh It's Monday Animatic guy returns for another song, but this one has a lot more energy and polish, and he even gets to rap. I think I might unironically like the synth rock version more than the final.
It takes teamwork, it takes teamwork for everyone to smile. It takes teamwork, it takes teamwork to make it all worthwhile.
Number 2, Mad Chase. With the apocalyptic outfits being a reference to Mad Max, it's good that they tried to have a car chase with SpongeBob and Plankton. It's something we've barely seen from the franchise before, and this scene makes excellent use of its established elements. Number 1, Uncle Albert. Patrick sees his uncle's dead body dried up on the side of a van on land. Okay, it makes sense why they would cut this.
I'm gonna travel the world! He's living the dream.
A lot of thought and planning goes into how movie trailers should go about spoiling the plot for audiences ahead of release, and some attempts go unseen by the general public. Dan Vollmeyer's DMV Media did a draft of a trailer for Sponge Out of Water. They did loads of on-air and marketing promos for Nickelodeon around that time, and this has the same feel.
Coming in 2015, you will know SpongeBob SquarePants like this. And you'll see him in 3D.
Mom, Mamma mia!
It doesn't feature any completed footage from the movie, just clips from early season 9 episodes and test footage, which isn't too different from what ended up on screen. Now, the first movie also had an unfinished trailer, but it wasn't advertised in a way that you'd expect. Remember the trailer for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man?
This is my gift.
Wow.
It is my curse.
Who are you?
Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Now imagine that, but with SpongeBob.
This is my gift. It is my curse. Who am I?
A ding-a-ling!
Wingnut!
Knucklehead McSparzatron!
This pitch came from marketing material creator Jules A. Levy as a way to introduce SpongeBob to broader audiences. And this draft was completed using work prints. It's cool to get a glimpse of the movie in the middle of production, especially the live-action segments. But I'm more amused by how close it is to its inspiration, right down to using the same music.
One sponge
I'm Omen.
will take you.
According to Levy, Paramount didn't know what to do with this, and I really don't know either, although I could see it being dropped online nowadays. I guess it's not too far off from the parody posters used to market the sequel. Those are just as questionable. Now here's the secret entry on my list. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie game has levels where SpongeBob and Patrick are teleported to empty voids that make me want to hurl my controller at the nearest human being. Were these based on deleted scenes from the film?